IRLAB Therapeutics have reported for the fourth quarter of 2023, and the company will now give a presentation followed by a Q&A with equity analysts. Viewers can also ask their questions in the live chat. So, to present the fourth quarter of 2023 in the digital studio, I'm happy to hand over to CEO Dr. Gunnar Olsson. Please go ahead.
Thank you. If you could have the slides, please. Good morning and welcome to the fourth quarter and end of year report from IRLAB. Next slide. Today's agenda. I will start by giving you news from the period. That will be followed by an R&D update by Nicholas Waters. And then Viktor Siewertz will give an update on the financials. I will then come back and give you some concluding words and looking into the future. And we will then end with a Q&A session. Next slide. Operational highlights during the fourth quarter. For mesdopetam, in October we initiated a collaboration with Clintrex, our US regulatory and clinical strategy advisors, and with the Profarma Group, our US regulatory agent. And the collaboration was to prepare for an end of phase 2 meeting with the FDA. In mid-December, we submitted an application for such a meeting, and the FDA granted a meeting, and the date was set to February the 20th this month. Next, please. For pirepemat, IRLAB was granted an additional new patent for the drug that is used in the ongoing clinical development program. This patent runs into 2038, and it has the potential possibilities for extension that would lead to a potential market exclusivity into the early 2040s. Next slide, please. For 757, we completed the preclinical development activities, and we've started compilation of all the data for a regulatory submission to have permission to start our clinical phase 1 studies. IRLAB was selected to receive a grant of $2 million from the well-known and well-reputed Michael J. Fox Foundation to support the development of 757 for the treatment of apathy. And we have now also contracted a CRO to run the phase 1 study following the regulatory approval. And we anticipate the start of that study will be in Q2 this year. Next, please. Business development and financial activities. We held a capital markets day in October in Stockholm, where we presented the portfolio development as well as the growth strategy for the company. We participated in the Bio-Europe in November in Munich, and we have now a lot of follow-up discussions with companies that we met at that meeting. Investor meetings. We have participated and presented at 5 investor conferences, and we have had continuous discussions with our financial advisors and investors. We increased the liquidity with a loan facility of up to 55 million Swedish crowns in December, and this is to extend our financial runway and, of course, increase our business opportunities. Next, please. Other highlights from the last quarter. With regard to myself, my appointment as CEO was extended into this year in December. We have recruited Fredrik as a new Director of Clinical Science and Biometrics, and he joined the company 1st of January. And this is, of course, a good strengthening of our clinical capabilities since we are now seeing more projects coming into the clinical phase. Next, please. Events after the period. With regard to Piremat, the study has now come to a point where we can start generate new insights from the ongoing clinical study. We have observed that during the 1 month baseline period, fall rates are higher and they are more stable than we anticipated before initiation of the study. We have come to a point where we see a steady recruitment rate following opening of all the centers from late May. We have very positive patient feedback and we have had repeated requests to continue medication also after the end of the study period. And all in all, this gives us the ability to drive data-driven estimates for more accurate study timelines. And based on this, our data-driven estimates today states that we have patient recruitment to continue into the third quarter 2024. And probably absolutely important to us, it also shows that we have a higher probability to detect treatment effects based on the observations of higher fall rate, more stability during the run-in phase, and the lower dropout rates that we have seen. Next, please. Scientifically, we have now 2 abstracts accepted for presentation at the 18th International Conference on Alzheimer and Parkinson's disease in Lisbon now in March. The first abstract will give a detailed description of the REACT-PD, the phase 2b study with Piremat. And the second abstract will give a summary of preclinical observations of 1117. And this is the first time that the company reveals data at the scientific conference with regard to the 1117 compound. Next, please. Time now to shift, and I invite you, Nicholas, to give us an R&D update, please.
Thank you, Gunnar, and thank you everyone listening today. I'll give you a brief update on the progress in the programs during Q4. Next slide, please. As you all know, we are a company focusing heavily on Parkinson's disease, but not exclusively on Parkinson. And in PD, there has been very good treatments available for the past 60 years in the terms of various formulations of levodopa, which treats the basic symptoms of Parkinson's disease, tremor, rigidity, and bradykinesia. However, there are a number of issues which are not dealt with in Parkinson's. And Michael J. Fox Foundation recently published a survey. They have been asking patients across the globe now for since 2017, actually, asking questions about their priorities in terms of treatment. And this is the slide here shows a excerpt of that data, indicating that balance, falls, instability is still a huge problem, or is the biggest problem for these patients. But there is also problems in the basic treatment of tremor, rigidity, bradykinesia, the hallmark symptoms of Parkinson's. And then we have the neuropsychiatric aspects of Parkinson, which are not dealt with properly. And that is treatment of cognitive function, but also mood aspects where apathy falls to some extent. And all these issues, they align with the areas that IRLAB is focusing on. Next slide, please. These symptoms, they come and they grow over time during the course of the disease, the 20 years, roughly 20 years of disease. And indicating that, next slide, please, we are addressing all the next again, that's Piremat, and next again, and next again, sorry for this. There you see, We are covering all the aspects of which are poorly or not treated at all today with our pipeline. Here, both 942, 757, mesdopetam, and 1117. Next, please. Mesdopetam, a brief update on the status there. Next slide, please. This is a first-in-class compound with a novel mechanism. There is no other drugs that we can see in the clinical development pipeline globally, which addresses the same kind of mechanism. And this is a mechanism which has been implicated in the genesis of dyskinesia in lots of literature in the past few years. Mesdopetam is an antagonist at the dopamine D3 receptor, so it inhibits over-activation of D3 receptors. We have built a patent portfolio around the asset, which has the potential to protect exclusivity into the 2040s. The lead indication for mesdopetam is levodopa-induced dyskinesia, which is an undertreated complication in Parkinson's disease across the globe. There are additional indications that we can consider also for mesdopetam, such as psychosis in Parkinson. Next, please. The progress in the program has been quite steady during the fall. We started to work towards an end of phase 2 study in September, October of this year. And last year, sorry. We have compiled the so-called briefing book, which is the documentation that the FDA needs to be able to assess the utility of the product and to discuss the further development of the program. So we have, together with our collaborators in the US, our colleagues and friends at Clintrex and PPG, developed this briefing book. We submitted that actually on the 4th of January, so it's in this year. The objective of the end of phase 2 meeting is to get alignment with the US regulators concerning the further development of the phase 3 program for mesdopetam. We expect that we will have some sort of written response from the FDA about 30 days after the meeting, and the meeting is, as I said, on the 20th of February. Next, please. The briefing book is built around all of the studies that we've done with mesdopetam, from the early preclinical IND-enabling studies, the long-term tox studies, the CMC development, that is the development of drug product and a drug substance. And then we have the phase 1b studies indicating this antidyskinetic and safety. We have the phase 2a study, which indicated further antidyskinetic properties, but also expanded the safety and tolerability database. And more recently, the phase 2b study. And in parallel with the phase 2b study, we conducted a number of phase 1 studies necessary for continuing with phase 3. That is so-called drug-drug interaction studies, that is studying how mesdopetam works together with other types of drugs that are used in this population. And then also the so-called mass balance, that is following where mesdopetam goes in the body and how it's taken care of and when it comes out. These are very important studies to complete the package for an end of phase 2 meeting. We've also studied pharmacokinetic properties in different populations, special populations, that is Asian versus Caucasian populations. And we can conclude that there is a very consistent pharmacokinetic properties across all populations with mesdopetam. Also in the phase 2b study, we saw a clear signal of antidyskinetic efficacy and a very, very strong safety and tolerability package. So next step here is the end of phase 2 meeting to be able to actually properly define the phase 3 program for the product. Next, please. Pirepemat. this is a drug which actually addresses the biggest problem in Parkinson's disease, falling or balance issues and falling. Next, please. Where we have an ongoing phase 2b study, as you are aware. Why is it so important to prevent falls in Parkinson? Well, about half of all Parkinson patients fall recurrently and this is in the later stages of the disease, of course. But this also shortens the lifespan for patients. And the reason that patients fall is a loss of function in the cortical areas of the brain. So you have cognitive decline, you have impaired balance, which leads to falls, and then, of course, injuries and costs. Next, please. So also pirepemat is the first-in-class drug with a novel mechanism. Like mesdopetam, pirepemat defines a new class of CNS drugs. This is very, very important aspect of the program from a commercial perspective. Then we have the mechanism. It's a novel mechanism inhibiting alpha-2 and serotonin 7 receptors. And the combination there leads to a very strong activation of cortical neurotransmission and cortical functions. Also here we have patent-based exclusivity, a portfolio of patents covering the asset, which could give exclusivity into the 2040s. Next, please. Also here we have built a package of studies or a series of studies building towards the pivotal studies with, of course, phase 1 studies initially, besides all the preclinical development, CMC, tox and safety studies. We have recently completed the long-term tox studies, 6 and 9 month studies. So we now have a complete package of toxicology data. We have a complete package of DMPK and safety data with the compound. In the phase 2A study, we discovered that the drug actually improves cognitive function and has the potential to reduce falls. We also saw some effects on neuropsychiatric symptoms such as apathy. And we're now in the middle of the phase 2B study, which Gunnar alluded to. We have done some interesting observations in that study, which helps us enormously in terms of completing this study. And this study evaluates the effects on fall frequency, balance, postural dysfunction, and also cognitive neuropsychiatric endpoints. Next, please. What we have discovered looking at the baseline data. So just a brief on the study outline. Patients are selected for the study by the sites that are 38 of them now around across Europe that knows their patients well. They are recruited into the study, and then we measure for a month. There is a measurement of the number of falls in these patients. And that month is then followed, in most cases, is followed by randomization. That means that the patients are then given placebo or either of 2 doses of pirepemat for 3 months. That is followed by a number of follow-up visits and then data management. But what we have seen now in the data so far, in the baseline data, and of course this is blinded, we see that the patients fall 2 to 3 times more than previously anticipated. And the anticipations are, of course, based on literature data, but also on surveys we did before the study was started. And this means that we have a much higher baseline of falls. And if we have a higher baseline of falls, then it's much easier to detect a reduction of falls or an increase of falls, actually, if that should occur. So that's a much better outset for the statistical analysis, which means that we now believe that we may be able to reduce the number of patients in the study with retained power, so-called power to detect an effect. We expect, next please. We expect the study to be concluded now in terms of recruitment in August or in Q3 this year. That is based on the fact that all clinical centers are activated since May last year, and then they're pushing the recruitment quite hard right now. Looking at the cost of falling, it's quite substantial. We have discussed this before, but in the recent publications from the CDC, about $30,000 per patient ending up in hospital. And of course, that comes with a lot of problems for the patients and the caregivers also. So there's a high cost to falling, and if we can reduce that just a little bit, it would help these patients and this population a lot. Next, please. A few words on the development of the preclinical programs also. So if we start with the next slide. 757 to treat apathy. And apathy is one of the most common neuropsychiatric symptoms across neurological indications. Parkinson, Alzheimer, frontotemporal dementia, and you can go on with a long list. So this is a drug which is not only confined to Parkinson, but we, of course, have a focus on the issues for Parkinson patients. And as Gunnar mentioned, we received a grant from the Michael J. Fox Foundation, who thinks that apathy is one of the most important aspects to treat. We got a $2 million grant from them to run a phase 1 study, or a series of phase 1 studies. I'll come back to that. As you can see, there's a lot of patients available with this. The estimations around in the largest markets across the globe is about between 1 and 7 million patients, and also the families around them. And we expect to be able to start IND. We are in the middle, or we have completed the IND enabling studies, and we will start phase 1 studies during Q2. For 942, which is developed in parallel with 757, we are right now in the IND enabling studies, and we expect to have it phase 1 ready by this year. And cognition is a huge issue for Parkinson patients and also in other neurological disorders. There is one treatment available, cholinesterase inhibitors, which are approved, but they lack efficacy and are not very strong, and they have a lot of side effects. We think that there is place for a good or a better treatment for cognitive dysfunction in Parkinson's disease. And lastly, but not least at all, 1117, I'll come back to that, a totally new technology to treat the basic symptoms of Parkinson's disease. Next, please. So the progress in Q4 with 757 is that we actually have now compiled all the documentation needed for a CTA or a clinical trial application in the European systems, where we will start to apply for approval to get approval for phase 1. We have completed the CMC development for phase 1. And as I said, we have funding for the phase 1 studies. And this is a quite substantial package of phase 1 studies. We start with a single ascending dose study and move directly then into a multiple ascending dose study over 9 days. And then we look at food interaction all in one package. So it's a quite substantial, comprehensive phase 1 study package that we are running together with the Michael J. Fox Foundation. And that is to prepare for proper phase 2 or phase 1B, phase 2A studies. Then we have 942, which also has the potential to be the first in a totally new class, like 757, once again, first in class, to improve cognitive functions. The development there proceeds according to the plans that we have laid out. We are right now in the middle of finalizing the CMC development of API and drug product for further studies. We plan to initiate tox studies this year, the 1-month tox studies, to be able to compile the documentation by the end of the year. We are right now in discussions with, as you know, with MSRD or Otsuka for the further development of any of these or both of these assets. Next, please. 1117, which is a really interesting product or project, where we have discovered a technology where we can actually get sustained efficacy over a much, much longer time than you can get with levodopa. And I'm showing here a graph, and this is an excerpt from the poster actually that we will show at the ADPD Congress in Lisbon in a month's time. The graph illustrates the oral administration of 1117, and then you see the sustained activation of motor function, and this is in Parkinsonian rodents, in rats, which have Parkinson's disease. And this should be contrasted then with what you can get with levodopa, for instance. You get about 2 hours activation of motor function in this type of model, and with apomorphine, slightly less, about 1.5 hours. So those two, apomorphine and levodopa, are the most used anti-Parkinsonian treatments today. So here we can actually provide potentially a once daily treatment for Parkinson, which would simplify the treatment, improve the treatment dramatically for patients. This also has the potential to be the first in a novel class. We don't know of any similar compounds in the development pipeline based on the same technology that we have developed. And one of the key issues here is that we have rapid onset with the drug. That's really, really important for the patients. Rapid onset and long-standing efficacy. We're working on the development of CMC. This is a highly potent compound, so there are specific aspects of developing the CMC or the drug product API here. Next, please. Viktor, I'd like to turn over to you to give a brief on the financial situations.
Thank you. A few words on the financials. So next slide, please. So if we go through the panels at the bottom, to the left, we have the cash flow, where we can see that we basically had the same amount of cash in Q4 as in Q3, which of course is due to the loan that we took in late December. In the middle, you can see the cost structure, and you can see that we have decreased cost during the last 4 quarters, and that is of course due to a lot of activities being finalized, such as the phase 2b study with mesdopetam, and also the 757 project, which is now phase 1 ready, where we had some cost during 2024, for example, for toxicology studies and so on, which are now paid for. So that is good in the current financial climate. We do keep our personnel. We believe that they are very important. So we are still maintaining about 30 employees in the company. And as stated in the bullets, the cash position was about 111 million Swedish krona at the year end. Next slide, please. So this is just an excerpt from the Q4 report, where we also see that the cash flow is a little bit less than last year, and that we have 111.3 million in cash. That's all about the numbers. So back to you, Gunnar.
Thank you, Viktor. Next slide, please. So some concluding words and some looking into the future. I start by reminding you of our strategy. We are addressing all stages of Parkinson's disease and also other CNS disorders. We're discovering novel candidate drugs with our unique ISP platform, and that gives us true innovation, a higher success rate than industry standard, and it gives us a very strong IP position for our compounds. We're developing our CDs from discovery up to clinical proof of concept, and then we are seeking partnering to run the phase 3 and future commercialization of the drugs. Next, please. This year, or I should say the last year, 2023, has been a year of very major progress in the pipeline. And let me summarize you from this slide. With Mesdopetam, we started the year by getting the readout and top-line results of the phase 2b study. Later in the year, we secured the full ownership and all rights to the product. We took it to phase 3 readiness, and we have now a scheduled end of phase 2 meeting later in this month. For Pirepemat, we have the ongoing phase 2b study. All the clinical centers were opened. We had the first pre-specified DSMB evaluation of the study. And as I stated before, we got a new patent granted that potentially extends market exclusivity into the early 2040s. For 757, we completed our preclinical development program. We received a grant, $2 million from Michael J. Fox Foundation. And as Nicholas pointed out, it will finance the first-in-man study that includes a SAD and a MAD and food interaction study in one study package. And we will start the phase 1 study in the second quarter this year. For 1117, this compound was selected last year, and we took it into preclinical development phase. For 942, we have the ongoing development activities progressing according to plan. With regard to the portfolio, we have now created a world-leading position in Parkinson with our product portfolio. Some words on business development. This was a year where we really increased all our business development activities, and we have multiple opportunities that are evaluated. Next, please. And this has led to the following pipeline table. At the top, you see Mesdopetam, lead indication, treatment of LIDs, phase 3 ready program, and an end of phase 2 meeting with the FDA in the next 2 weeks. Pirepemat, the lead indication, treatment of falls in Parkinson in phase 2b, and with study enrollment completed during third quarter this year. 757 for treatment of apathy, now phase 1 ready, and we anticipate start of phase 1 during second quarter this year. The 942 to treat cognitive impairment in preclinical, 1117 in preclinical to treat Parkinson's disease main symptoms. Both these compounds where we anticipate to have them phase 3 ready during the year. Next. Some words about business development efforts. With the intensified activities, it is now so that awareness of IRLAB and the development pipeline we have, that awareness is increasing, and this is very good news. We have continuous and frequent dialogue with potential partners, and we have partnering opportunities across the entire portfolio. However, in the near term, we focus on Mesdopetam and 757. Next slide, please. Our key priorities, they are focused for value creation. And to summarize them, in the clinical phase, it is, of course, the end of phase 2 meeting with the FDA later this month. It is to complete the recruitment for phase 2b in the Pirepemat study, and it is to initiate the phase 1 study with 757. On the preclinical side, it is to make sure that we drive 942 and 1117 for phase 1 readiness. And with regard to financing, we need to increase our capital base to enable further value creation. And we do this through both business development activities as well as other financing opportunities. With regard to business development, we have a continued dialogue with potential collaborators and collaborate partners and licensees. And we continue our dialogues with financial advisors and investors. Next. When we look forward over the next 18 months, we have multiple possibilities for high value creation, or if you want to use the word inflection points for value creation. With mesdopetam, it is the end of phase 2 meeting with the FDA, as well as the ongoing business development activities for phase 3. For pirepemat, it is the completion of the study and business development activities for phase 3. For 757, it is the start of the first human study and of course also the completion of that study and the business development activities to seek development and collaboration. For 942, it is getting phase 1 ready, start phase 1 and initiate development collaboration. I should not say initiate, I should say continue the ongoing development collaboration discussions that we have. And for 1117, it is to be phase 1 ready and get into active phase 1 study. Next slide, please. So, IRLAB, having now a world-leading portfolio in Parkinson's to reduce the burden of the disease and to transform lives. We have pioneering biology and we have the unique ISP to generate our new molecules. We have a focused strategy. We have a validated business model. We are discovering new CDs that we take to clinical proof of principle, and we are doing deals. We have a broad and world-leading portfolio of projects in the Parkinson area, and we are an organization positioned for success. That's all for the presentation part. Let's now move over to the question and answer section. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gunnar, Nicholas, and Viktor, for your presentation. It's always interesting and inspiring to listen to your progress and activities. It's time to start off the Q&A, and I will grab one before we hand over to the equity analyst. So my question is, this upcoming end of phase 2 meeting and phase 3 ready meeting on February 20th. How time consuming is it for you in the management to perform this or to prepare this meeting?
You want the long or the short answer, but the long answer is that we've been preparing for this since 2017, basically, since we started the development. But in the short term, the preparations are of course time consuming. However, they are not. Is not to the expense of any of the other activities that we're running. The team has been preparing the briefing book together with external experts. A lot of good, very, very good advice from our US colleagues in how to compile the documentation from, as I said, the early development to now the late stage development or mid stage development in a very nice package. That took a few weeks during December, a lot of meetings, and then right now we are reading studying our own data, refreshing our memories of things we did 10 years ago and 5 years ago, and preparing for the discussions. And the discussions are based on the number of questions that we have posed to the FDA, as you do in end of phase 2 meetings.
And let me just add here, I want to commend the team that has done this, because what I think you should all recognize, that is that within less than 6 months, we have secured the ownership and full rights to the product. We have been transferring all information and material from Ipsen. We have started new collaboration with US colleagues. We've put together the briefing pack, and we will have had the FDA meeting for end of phase 2. I think that is a really good achievement by the team to do all this within less than 6 months.
Thank you. And by that, it's time to hand over to Alexander Krämer at ABG Sundal Collier. Please go ahead with your questions, Alexander.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for taking my questions. I have a couple of questions. I will start with the first one. So the first one is about the end of phase 2 meeting with the FDA as well. And I was wondering about the mid-term prospects here. At your CMD last year, you talked about the possibility of having a special protocol assessment, SPA, to have an agreement on the phase 3 design. Do you still plan to have such a SPA in place? And what is your timeline for such an agreement?
We are planning for an SPA to sort out details of potential protocols for the phase 3 studies. We cannot give a timeline on that at this time. We need to have concluded the end of phase 2 meeting before we can actually go into that discussion with the FDA. But that will, of course, be the next urgent step to get that done.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. And another question is regarding the Pirepemat's REACT-PD study. And here my question would be, could you give us some color on the number of patients that you have recruited so far? How happy you are with the recruitment speed? And also regarding that study is about the study amendment that you brought up in your press release. What are the conditions for such a study amendment? And if such a study amendment would be granted in H1 this year, what impact will it have on the timeline on the whole process? Like how much is it going to accelerate the process of finishing recruitment and top-line data readout?
That was 4 questions in one.
Sorry.
I'll start from the end so that I can remember. And you'd have to remind me of the first one later on. Mm-hmm. But the timelines for the study, in the guidance we gave today, actually yesterday and today, we have built in any further discussions or with regulators on this. But the benefit of what we have learned from the study leads to the conclusion that we can actually reduce the number of patients from the originally thought 165. And you should all know that this is the power analysis is based on a statistical assumption that you make before a study. However, now we have learned much more, so we can actually refine the power analysis, which means that we have the potential to reduce that. But that needs to be discussed with the regulators, and that needs to be followed by a discussion on the statistical analysis plan. So those 2 things need to go hand in hand to be able to get to a conclusion. But we built that into the guidance that we have delivered today. Mm-hmm. So we don't expect to. We do expect to be able to get the last patients in by Q3.
Yeah, let me add here. For us as a company, the absolutely key priority for us, that is to have a study that delivers results that helps us to take the next decision on investment on continued development. And we are doing now absolutely whatever we can to really get to that position, to have a strong position when we have the data coming out. So rest assured, we will communicate more details as we move forward and when we know more. But as Niklas pointed out, This includes interactions with the regulatory authorities, and let us not speculate anything until we've had those kind of discussions completed.
No, we want the responses from the regulators before we share the information that we have generated. That's a key thinking around how we communicate.
Okay, thank you very much. That's it from my side.
Thank you, Alexander. Good questions.
Thank you so much, Alexander. And it's time to hand over the word to Sue Romanoff of Edison Group. Please go ahead, Sue.
Thank you for the update. It was very helpful. And Alexander took some of my questions here, but can you give us for Mesopotam, I think we talked about having a small program. Will the phase 3 study be sufficient for the regulatory approval, or do you see a need to do a second study?
We know that the ground rule from regulatory authorities, including FDA, that is that they want to have 2 phase 3 studies. However, there are exceptions, and the FDA has published a paper where they describe those type of exceptions. Our advisors, they believe that there is a chance that we might only need 1 study. But let us keep this open. We have the meeting in 2 weeks' time from now, and we should not speculate here until we have had the meeting and when the discussion of this particular question have been done with the FDA. So we will definitely come back on this.
And so when it comes to the size of the study, you asked about that also in the same question. So when it comes to the design of the phase 3 program, of course, that is something that we will know much more about after the end of phase 2 meeting. But what we have guided so far is that based on the data we have generated, phase 2A, phase 2B data, we expect that roughly 150 to 200 patients would be enough for 1 phase 3 study. To be able to assess the efficacy on dyskinesia, but also an anti-Parkinsonian effect of the compound. If you recall our previous presentations, we've talked about the reduction of off time, which is really, really important. And we want to include that, if possible, in the label. Yeah. So 150 to 200 patients per phase 3 study, basically.
And importantly, the duration of the double-blind treatment will only be 3 months.
Yes.
So you have a lot going on. I mean, like, how do we think about the prioritization? I mean, I know you're working 24/7 here with even just the end of phase work, but can you give us an idea of, the way you think about on the prioritization of all your work?
I will only give you a very generalized statement, and that is that, of course, the further you have developed a product, the higher the priority to really take it all the way through. So that is absolutely important for us. Secondly, as I mentioned, we are doing a lot of activities to secure financing of all our projects. A lot of business development activities, a lot of interactions with financial advisors and investors. So what we presented here today in terms of priorities and timelines, that is what the present plan is about. Of course, if things would happen that are not unforeseen, we, as any company, would of course then need to look into the prioritization to see if there is a need to do any changes. But what we presented today, that is the position we have for the moment.
Another way to respond to that, Sue, is to say that we are devoted to developing all 5 assets as professionally as we can, according to the timelines that we have set out to do them. And we have currently the internal and consultant resources to do that. So that's another way of responding.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sue. And it's time to hand over to Fredrik Thor at Redeye. Please go ahead, Fredrik.
Yes, and hello. Just the first question to clarify, so I understand it correctly, Nicholas, you mentioned the recruitment being finalized in Q3 in the PERIFERMAT study. Was that with or without the potential amendments in reducing number of patients?
I can say that is independent of the guidance we've given is independent of the patient population number. It's based on the likelihood of getting or retaining the power that we want to have for being able to detect an effect.
Okay.
Sorry for that answer.
Possibly. And the next question, you mentioned also that the higher fall frequency than expected. Does this mean that it's a slightly different patient population, or just that you had to generalize data before, or can you explain this a bit more, how it could differ?
Not necessarily another type of population. I mean, when you start a study, you define the characteristics of the patients that should go into the study by defining inclusion and exclusion criteria. And according to those criteria, the expectation was that they should fall around 2 to 3 times a month, which would be enough actually to be able to see a reduction. But here we see 2 to 3 times more falling in the baseline month. And what is really striking is the consistency by the falling rate, the individual falling rate. It doesn't change over a 30 days period. It's the same every day. Which is also helps in dealing with the data. So what we've done is that we have been looking at the structure of the data and trying to understand how to best assess a statistical model to the data later on when we have all the data, or even the treatment period. We don't have that.
And also maybe a final question here. You mentioned in the report that you had partnering meetings during the autumn, and that there will be some follow-ups in the spring and summer.
Yes.
How dependent are these on the end of the phase 2 meeting? Is that what they want to return to after you have more information from that, or is it independent?
With the discussions concerning mesdopetam, I think it's pretty clear that most companies that we are in discussion with, they are of course eager to get the FDA feedback before taking the next step. So I think definitely, as you alluded to, things are dependent on the FDA meeting.
As they are for any product of this at this stage. So that's not a strange thing. However, the groundwork has been laid out during the fall and the winter.
And we think it's a very good sequence of events. We've had the initiation of discussions with other companies. They have looked into the data, and they are now waiting to see the due diligence that the FDA has on the data. And that is something that they will use in their decision making.
And actually, maybe a final question. The Michael J. Fox grant that was about the phase 1 trial. How will that be recognized? Is that dependent on you starting the trial or finalizing the trial, or how do you see that grant?
It's very simple. They fund the study. So when we start, they fund. When we end, they finalize the payments, or we finalize the payments together with Michael J. Fox. So it's very simple.
Okay.
Money out, money in.
Perfect.
And it's actually I need to stress this. This is fantastic for the company to be recognized by the Michael J. Fox Foundation, and also the fact that they focus on the apathy aspect of it, which has been a hidden problem for so many years, and we've lifted that. They saw that and they jumped on it. I think that's really important.
Thank you so much, Fredrik. Thor at Redeye. I have one last question. It's also regarding the Michael J. Fox Foundation. You were granted $2 million. Will this take you through the whole phase 1 study, or even beyond?
this will cover the cost for the study. So it will take us through this year and part of next year. That is when we anticipate the study to be completed. So that's what will be covered by the grant.
Okay, so thank you so much, management team at IRLAB, and we are all looking forward to the response from FDA around the 20th of March. And good luck going forward, and thank you everyone that has watched.
Thank you.